In my college years over 10 years ago, a Japanese writer by the pen name of Ryukishi 7 was my obsession. I love how he wrote horror. He wrote scenes with horrifying dread, gruesome gore, and deceptive twists that you don't see coming or were anticipating. His best known work is Higurashi no Naku Koro ni, or When They Cry. Even after 20 years since its release, it still holds up today. Ryukishi 7 wrote the first chapter of Higurashi while he was still in college in the early 2000s. He was inspired by a friend's stage play and wrote what is essentially the prototype of Higurashi, the Hinamizawa bus stop. He submitted the script to a theater company, but sadly, it was rejected. His younger brother suggested he should turn his script into a visual novel, and the rest, as the cliche goes, is history. A lot of elements from his screenplay is transferred over to the main story, like the characters Rika and Mion and Hinamizawa Village. The prototype of Higurashi can be found as a bonus story in the PC and console release of Higurashi Ho, and as a standalone manga published by Square Enix, and ironically enough, it was turned into a stage play in 2015. Higurashi started out as a sound novel, a subcategory of the visual novel genre that is more focused on the narrative text, atmospheric music, and sound effects to set the tone and mood of the story. Ryu 7 does a great job of using those elements for Higurashi. The first chapter of Higurashi, the Demon Away arc, was released in August 2002 at Gemakai, and the last chapter, Festival Accompanying arc, was released in July 2006. This story was told over a couple of years, and it was very popular amongst its Japanese fanbase, to the point that it received an anime adaptation in April 2006, produced by Studio Dean, who goes on to produce many of the Higurashi spin-offs. It came over to the West sometime around 2009, where it saw some level of popularity amongst anime fans, particularly ones that enjoy that kind of horror. As mentioned earlier, Higurashi is a sound novel, and the original art was drawn by Ryu 7 himself. And, well, it has a certain charm to it. While the visuals have improved with each port, the main focus should really be on the text of the story and the audio. Also, to be fair, the visuals for the anime have changed and improved over time as well. Visual novels in a similar genre like Danganronpa does a great job of telling a story with its over-the-top visuals and cool music. But I feel like there's something lost in the horror when you're seeing it. Your imagination creates the image for you when you read the text, and audio helps enhance what you're imagining. The image in your mind is how you interpret what you're reading, and the words from a good author will paint the picture better than what is given to you most of the time. Throughout Higurashi, you're trying to piece together a mystery that spans across 8 chapters. 8 different story arcs that are different from the last, but are all connected. You discover clues to help you along the way, things that provide context to something that happens in a previous chapter, learning about the characters' personalities and motivations that gives you an idea on why they're acting a certain way in a previous arc. And the great thing about Higurashi, in the sound novel, you're given information literally called tips to help you flesh out the lore, characters, and the village's history. After you finish the arc, you get access to conversations from the characters talking about what happened in the story you just read. They themselves want to know what's going on and want to solve the mystery with you as well. That is hilarious to me, and I think it's incredibly creative. It's clearly just Ryu 7 having fun. The story in Higurashi is about trying to understand the supernatural elements that are in the village of Hinamizawa, and why the people are being murdered year after year. The accepted explanation for what's happening is that the village's deity, Oyashiro, is punishing those that want to hurt the village in any way. Someone always dies in a horrific way, and someone always gets spirited away, with some random deaths sprinkled in for good measures during the local festival to honor their god. Throughout the 8 chapters of Higurashi, you learn more about the village and its dark history. You discover clues that help you find what is really going on in the story. Are these deaths and disappearances year after year really doing of a vengeful god? Or is there a reasonable explanation for it? Ryu 7 does a great job of keeping you hooked on the story with each arc's finale, having you asking more questions while receiving very little answers. You want to know more about what the hell's going on, and understandably, why is it all happening? A good mystery should keep you invested. For those that have already watched or read Higurashi, I think you will agree with me on that. And for those that haven't, you'll be in for a great story. Also, what's great about Higurashi is you can solve the mystery with the first arc alone, if you know what you're looking for. Of course, what the franchise is known for is the bloody murder scenes. And all of the kills are great. From having your skull bashed into goo to clawing out your own throat open, Each death really does make you believe these characters are cursed by some demonic god. However, at the time the anime was introduced to the West, the blood and violence was what it was known for. When talking to other anime fans, when it first came to the West, that was all they talked about, and I get it. We see these cute characters getting absolutely brutalized and killed in an atrocious fashion. But I think it does a great disservice to the great story that just happens to be covered in blood and guts. But for those that recognize this franchise is more than just blood and guts, well, you have my respect. So, what makes Higurashi so timeless as a story? Well, it has all the elements that what makes horror mystery work. A rural village with a shady past. Characters that have layers and depth to them. A mystery that keeps pulling you in. And yes, the carnage that is just the bow on top of this bloody package. These elements can be seen just as horror tropes, and yeah, I agree. But that isn't a bad thing. In the right combination and how it's used and how it's backed up with a compelling and engaging story, sometimes it just works. Ryu 7 knows when to slow the story down to go up to the next scene, although some parts of it feels like it's being dragged out. I think this can be forgiven as it does a great job of putting you in the shoes of the protagonist, Keiichi Maebara, who is partially a stand-in for the reader, but he has enough personality where he is his own character, and not just a blank slate like how some characters are in some visual novels. Japanese horror uses a lot of psychological elements. In the sound novel and in the anime, the story is told from Keiichi Maebara's perspective. He's new to Hinamizawa, just as we are new to this story. Most people have moved or even visited a place we weren't familiar with at some point in our lives. We can relate to Keiichi's worry and anxiety when he is trying to adjust to his new life. He moved from a big city to the middle of nowhere in his mind. And when his head is filled with the stories of Hinamizawa's shady past and how there's a vengeful god named Oyashiro who punishes those that upsets him, it eventually gets to him. The crack starts to form slowly in his mind. We see how he goes from a typical teenage boy to a paranoid baseball enthusiast that uses his friends for batting practice. We see why and understands how he gets to that point, and maybe we'll become that way as well. I don't think there's a wrong format to enjoy Higurashi. If you want to read the sound novel or watch anime, you're going to have a good time. A sound novel is the truest form of the story, but unless you're a really fast reader or have a lot of time to enjoy it, it might be hard to convince someone to take that option. The anime adaptation is actually pretty good. It covers all the main points of the novel, and the anime holds up pretty well even after 20 years. But what is lost in the anime is some of the lore and world building from the tips section of the novels. Part of them might be touched on here and there, but I personally feel like it's more fleshed out in the novels. Take this scene for example in the first arc. When Keiichi eats the mochi given to him by his new friends, he discovers a sewing needle in it after biting into it. This would be beyond a joke. It would be a malicious act that only the most depraved people would do. In the novel, you can see the emotions he's going through after this discovery, and you see everything he's feeling at this moment. Anger at the cruel joke being played at his expense, betrayal because he thought his new friends cared about him, and most importantly, fear. Fear that his new friends and the village was out to get him. The fact that it is just cicadas just crying during the scene is creepy in itself. It's as if this is something that just happens normally in this village. In the anime, you see he is very angry and upset with his friends, but don't really see what's going on in his head at this moment. It's a lot more than just anger, but the overall tone of this moment communicates the point it needs to just fine in the anime. As mentioned earlier, there's no wrong format to enjoy Higurashi. Too bad I can't say the same for Eiko, but that could be a conversation for another day. As a fan of Ryu 7's work, I am very excited that he's working on Silent Hill F. I think he'll do a good job, and admittedly, this is the fanboy in me talking. I know the Silent Hill fanbase might be unfamiliar with him and have a lot of concerns about this project after so many years and games that have failed to live up to their expectations. All I can say is this: we'll meet again in our special place, Silent Hill, that town we see in our restless dreams. Higurashi no Naku Koro is something that should be experienced by fans of horror anime. It is a compelling story that sucks you in to its world and makes you want to see it to the end. Regardless of how you consume Higurashi, The journey, discovering, and learning about the characters and the story is worth the trip to this rural Japanese village. Also, please excuse me, my throat's feeling itchy, and before you go, a very special thank you to Gemakai for doing the thumbnails for this video, and as per usual, I will link his stuff below in the comment section. Higurashi has a lot of sentimental value to me as a series because I was really into it and introduced me to visual novels in general, and it is just one of my favorite series that I really want to talk about. Also, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for helping me cross over 500 subscribers. It is a major milestone for this channel, and I never thought I'd actually reach it. So, once again, thank you so much. So, next stop, 1,000 subscribers. Let's fucking go. I'll see you next time again in the Idle Room.